With the new Doors update, almost everything changed. Thanks to the addition of new rooms, entities, and items, the game isn't nearly as mechanical and easy as before, and now it requires, finally I'd say, much more skill and attention. With this renewal, of course, comes new things to learn and new things to execute, which might disorient most players at first, but don't worry, this video is exactly what you need in order to learn all the new essential strategies. This video will be covering both solo and co-op strategies, with tips and tricks from most of the top speedrunners of Doors. The video is divided into a couple major chapters that cover pretty much everything. There will also be an extra section at the end with just some minor tricks and extra knowledge on various things. Without further ado, let's get right into it. For this chapter, I'll go over the most important things you need to keep in mind, no matter what category you're doing, whether it's solo or co-op. These things will be essential to learn and practice. It's basically the fundamentals of speedrunning this game. So, to generally go over it, the main things to keep in mind are looting and coins, risking and entities in general, item usage, and major large rooms. Again, knowing and mastering these things is absolutely necessary and will be needed for running any category. Unlike in the previous update of Doors, coins are now absolutely necessary to grant yourself either a crucifix or a couple extra items from Jeff's shop. Try looting any drawers in your path, pick up as many coins as possible, and always keep an eye for any possible items on tables, big piles of coins or even crucifixes hanging around. After library it isn't necessary anymore, but looting for a chance on a couple extra items never hurts. All entities have overall been changed in one way or another. Some either received minor changes or completely got a major rework. They're all fucking broken. For example, there's no longer a really specific requirement for entities to spawn, which makes it impossible either to appear right away at the first few doors, or even 3 or 4 more doors later. Speaking of rush, most of the time he will take much longer to arrive, giving more time to risk, resulting in less time waste. He may also spawn in key rooms or even rooms without any closets, so be careful on that. Going into ambush, his pathing may be a bit broken, but most of the time you should be chilling if you have a crucifix. If you don't, well, just hide or pray to get halt instead of ambush. Next is halt. What really changed about him? Well, the only major difference is that he is a lot faster when doing his cycles, so the reaction time is needed in order to not get hit. The main tip for halt is to not use the crucifix on him. The animation takes so long that it's basically a waste, and pilling through him and damage boosting takes the exact time that it does to crucifix him, if not even less. And for the last entity, there's Jack? Well, it's not really important, but I thought it was worth mentioning considering the fact that Closet Jack is a lot, and I mean a lot, rarer. So don't be afraid of risking and dying to him anymore, as he's basically gone. All items are always useful to have, whether it's something as good as a crucifix or even just a pill. The items you need to aim for the most are the crucifix and the lockpicks, and maybe a pill. We'll get onto that later. So the lockpicks. They are currently the most important item due to how common keyrooms are now, but be careful, it's better if you're able to conserve one for door 100, since you can lockpick the door that leads to the box. So in the best case scenario, which means you have all switches downstairs, you can save yourself around 20 seconds from going upstairs to get the key. For the crucifix, it's pretty important too, especially later on if you get ambush. It's a massive time save, but again, as mentioned before, if you happen to get halt, do not use it. It's a better use on rush, especially around the doors 90 to 100. And pills. They received a rework too. The speed boost lasts for much more, and there's no longer a cooldown when pilling multiple times after the effect goes away. Something else that pills are pretty decent for is just using them on halt and damage boosting. It's very, very much faster than crucifying him. Pills are overall a really useful item to regain time lost from annoying rooms. Nothing too special, let's say, but I still recommend prioritizing lockpicks and crucifix. In the entire game, there's quite a few important and very large rooms, which are obviously library, door 100, and also the piss of hell that double basement is. These rooms are set, so it's important to learn what to do exactly in any of those and practice the paths needed extremely well. Starting off for library, paths generally depend on what category you're playing, but they're pretty straightforward to learn. The only things you need to keep in mind is just the basic stuff, nothing too particular. Crouch to not aggravate figure, read the code while you're collecting books, and check all the rows in the most efficient way possible. Just following a path works, but look out for off-path books carefully to not miss anything at all. Going into double basement, things get much more tense time-wise. It's nothing too hard considering the fact that this entire room is just the jackpot of RNG. All you really have to do is just memorize all of the lever spots. On screen, I'll show a really good map of the double basement made by Zafiri, and all credits to her for making it. The most I can really say is just pray for a really good lever spot on the side you're going down to. Many say it's more efficient to go left, others say right. Just trust your gut and gamble once again, as if this game wasn't all just a big gamble in the first place. And last but not least, door 100. I'd say the key factor here, if aiming for a good time, is the spawns for all switches with the most convenient situation of having them all downstairs while also having a lockpick for the box room. But yeah, generally paths and RNG are the biggest factors. Wow, what a surprise, right? RNG once again. For this room, you'll have to be a bit more careful and focused. Figure gets aggroed much more and you need to listen carefully for every switch. I definitely advise you to help yourself with a light source, since it's mostly dark across the entire room. The only thing that remains after that is box. It doesn't really matter how you do the first two stages, but the essential one is the last stage. Make sure to switch on all of the switches and then turn off the ones marked by the indicators. This will spare you from having to keep track of all the numbers for the question marks. The reason we light them all up is because the question marks are always illuminated unless you mess the box up. So we can switch all the switches on to make sure that we always get it correct first try. After that, just run to the elevator and you're done. Good job, you completed the game. For solos, things are pretty straightforward, I'd say. Once you learn what to do, overall the rest will just be resetting and gambling until you get a decent run. Don't stress it too much, trust me. Solos are going to become boring pretty quickly, especially considering the fact that it's the most optimized category in the game, with the most competitors. The grind will be long, but probably worth it, I guess. So, what do you specifically do? Well, as already said, if you learn everything major mentioned in the chapter before, all you need is just specific paths for library and door 100, so let's get straightforward with those. Library is all about focusing on hearing where the books are located, and how to move optimally without aggroing figure at the wrong time. The main path that everybody uses is pretty much this one. It's not too hard to memorize, and I recommend watching just how others execute it. This path is by far the most optimal one, and by utilizing it, you should be getting around 1 minute libraries from entrance to exit. Next up, once again, is door 100. Now, for solos, there's actually two main paths that most runners use. This path, which is the Kaiser path, and this path, which is the Pezzi path, both named after top runners. Both are efficient and good if, of course, executed perfectly. You need to be really careful, especially when timing your crouching, running, and looking for switches quickly. The best situation you can hope for is an overall around 2 minute time for this entire section, with all switches downstairs and a lockpick for the box door. With that, I think that's all I can say about solos. It's not really my category, so I can't really be giving specific tips. I don't want to give out false information, so we could end this chapter here, but I wanted to make this section as important as the others, and that's why I asked some of the best solo players some of the most important questions and tips that they would like to share with everyone. So, what advice would you give to new runners? What main strategies do you use for solos? Like, what do you keep in mind every time you go into a run?
So first of all, what I would recommend to newer players that have just recently started playing the game or even started speedrunning the game itself, please just watch top runs. Like, they include a lot of information of whether or not you should do this thing or that thing, what you should be mainly careful about. And speaking of what you should be careful about in the run in the first place, is trying to gather as many coins as possible in order to not just grab a crucifix, but maybe even a lockpick, a pill, maybe even a flashlight, to be able to support your runs in general in case you're ever running a solo no shop.
Well, with the new Hotel Plus update, I think it's kinda mandatory that looting for coins is definitely an underrated strategy. I see some of these newer runs where people are trying to just do old strat and just go as fast as they can. It's heavily recommended to go for coins that might be like a second out of your way with the new addition of the crucifix, because with that, ambush is not a factor anymore. Halt can be a big deterrent, as Halt can still end runs, but in terms of ambush, he's basically non-existent when Crucifix is in play.
Just look at the top runs, because they're always gonna have like the little details that you might pick up on, and that you might not even like see others, because it's that small that probably won't come across that advice like from anyone often. So it's very good to like pick up the small details in each part of the game.
So yeah, next question is, how do you like execute the most important parts of the game? So stuff like the library, the double basement, door 100. Like, what would you say is the most vital part of being able to do those quickly?
First of all, a lot of exercise probably. So you would have to get used to the route you're supposed to take. I would rather take a route that's given in some of the world record runs yet again, which goes back to basically needing to watch world record runs a lot. And then it just follows up by exercise, like literally just exercise them over and over again, get the hang of it, and then once you get the hang of it, it's really just mainly trying to be lucky, obviously, because after you're able to maintain your routes and library and just pull off the best times you could ever think of, then really the only thing that's left is, as I already mentioned, being lucky.
I've, practiced Door 100 quite a bit. I've just played out runs that are like, just an average pace for a Door speedrunner just to get practice on Door 100. And it's worth it to analyze what he does. If you want to take a certain route, like for example, I'm known for taking left route in solo, I've noticed that depending on how close figure is to you, you can manipulate where he ends up going afterwards. If he's close to you, he'll still stay in like the left route by the time you can cross over from left to right. However, if he's not close enough, he will sometimes walk down mid-path and he'll just essentially block you and you'll be forced to lose time.
So for the three main rooms, library, double basement, and door 100, I'd advise you look at some maps made by the community, because it's always good to know each spot already and get a path that you know you're going to go for. And even for like library and door 100, if you're on bad paces, then just go for it. Really practice it up, because when you get that good RNG, you want to know that you can like pull it off and execute it well.
Is how do you keep your motivation to keep running?
Right, so there's been a lot of people who've been asking me this, but probably a part that has been keeping me going to just speedrun the game itself is probably streaming. Specifically because I am able to talk to people in my chat while I'm just, going through the pains and sufferings and whatever you could ever think of over and over again, only to just see, well, another basement is just ruining my run, or, well, another key room has been spawning at door 87, my world record pace. But the main thing probably to this is patience. As much as I hate to say this, it's with pretty much every game.
I guess when the doors first came out, and I remember the first world record I saw in this game was, I believe, a 14:23 by Nux. This is like way back in like August, and I wanted to beat that time, and like for like a while I wasn't known as like a co-op player, just a solo player. And I would spend every day after school for like 5 hours playing solo no shop, and I could never get enough RNG for a world record. And so It takes a lot of perseverance. You have to really be dedicated to the category if you want to see a major improvement.
How I stay motivated for running solo no shop is it's definitely a big thing. Is just the people around me, you know. It's like a bit of competition and like, you know, yeah, hype you up when you get that good time. So that's good. Yeah, that's nice to have. You have to do a bit of no lifing, I'm afraid. Yeah, if you have a job, you know, you probably can't play as much then.
Moving on to co-op, I'm personally convinced that it's part of the game that takes much more skill, especially if comparing it to solos. There's much more things to know and learn, and I'm more than sure that it's harder and more complicated than what you would usually do alone in a run. Again, in solos you need to rely only on yourself, but for co-op it's different. You need to cooperate with your teammates, communicate the most important things extremely clearly, know how to execute specific roles, and much more. I'll be covering this chapter much more than the solo one, especially considering the fact that I myself run co-op as my main category, so I'm pretty sure that I can help on most things to learn about it. So for co-op as a whole, I'll be covering specific roles, specific paths, and communication. That's essentially everything you need. So, when running in a team, everything changes. By that, I mean the one person won't have to do everything. In co-op, with more people, the opportunities and strategies are much more than you could even think. So, when running with a team, everyone will have some kind of role, which is just having a specific set of tasks to execute. It can go from simple things like looting, to having a lead in front, having to take specific paths, and so much more. Whether it's a really easy role or a hard one, I heavily recommend to learn each single one. Not always the same people will be able to do their tasks, and changes might have to be done even in the middle of a run, especially considering some specific roles. Every role is as important as the other. You need to remember that. Going into the specific roles, first we have the looter. From the beginning, someone plays this role which has a task to pretty much, as the name suggests, loot for the majority of the game in order to get enough coins to buy a crucifix later in Jeff's shop, as well as with other items that he offers if possible. For this role, you need to be focused and loot as many drawers as you can, and treasure rooms of course, while also not getting voided by being too far back. Just constantly communicate with your teammates and you should be fine. This role isn't too necessary to learn and is mainly assigned to one single person, and is only relevant until library or Jeff's shop. For the entire run, someone will always be in front, leading the way. This role varies very often given the fact that a lot of people will be in front at different times, whether because they voided or just because they got there. This means that it's important for everyone to learn this role, since it's probably the most important one and that can really decide most of a run's outcome. Of course, by being in front, you will have to constantly communicate with your teammates, with the most important information being on how many doors are getting opened when risking, door number, and so on. Remember, people that are behind depend a lot on you, so if you're gonna open too many doors, they might die right on the spot. And because of this, when risking, it's essential to constantly, as said, communicate with who is voiding, and based on how many rooms they're back, open the needed doors for a successful void. This role requires good movement, focus, and constant communication. You absolutely need to learn this. The voider is an extremely important role too. Everyone in a team should know how to void, especially considering the fact that a single person can't do it for the whole run, due to the fact that it takes a fair bit of health every time that you execute it. Voiding is the strategy that saves the most time in an entire run, especially considering the fact that it can skip any unlocked rooms. Shit like painting, basement, and even double basement can be skipped. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal. The voider and person in front, aka the risker, need to communicate a lot, so keep that in mind. This role requires a lot of focus and attention, but everyone can learn it fairly fast with enough practice. It might be the hardest role to learn, but everybody needs to know how to do it. It's too big of a time save to not. Now, for major big rooms, in co-op things get a lot faster and easier. In library, double basement, and door 100, there's a lot of paths that can be taken, but they vary depending on the amount of people that are playing. Of course, more people equals much faster things, but in general it should take 2 times if not more faster than what solo would average. I will quickly go over all paths for all categories and briefly explain how all work. Starting off for library, the most important things to keep in mind are: the loser that has the coins to buy the crucifix should always go upstairs through the middle. The person that has the health to void at least once but also doesn't have any items on them goes left and then goes to the code. Whoever isn't triggering the library cutscene can hold W, D, S or A to pre-move in the cutscene and try and get a speed boost. For duo paths, there's left and right path and there's glitch path. Both paths are good, but most people prefer doing glitch path, which is the better one just for the fact that it instantly covers the row in the middle that contains off-path books that would be time wasting if having to get collected when doing the other path. For the trio path, there's only one path. One person goes to the code, one person goes through the middle and goes upstairs, and one person goes on the right side. For the squad path, same thing, basically the trio path, but another person goes right to cover more space. And 5+ paths. Here's where it gets pretty chaotic, but with a clear planning, library will just pass by like a normal room if executed well. In 5+, there's enough people that almost every row is covered by someone. It should be almost impossible to miss a book. For double basement, here things are much easier, nothing too crazy. Things barely change for almost all categories, so it's not worth going too much into detail. The most important part, that at least 2 people should go downstairs, one left and one right, no matter the category. If more people are in the game, then 2 or 3 players can go down so that the lever can be found faster. But generally, if it's not duos, there always needs to be at least one person that remains at the gate, otherwise it will be a big time loss. For door 100, what you need to keep in mind for this room is, the person with a lockpick needs to be the one that can get to the box door the quickest. In some categories, people can just go to the door straight away, as you can avoid figure and go straight to the right to the door while crouching and he will not approach you. In door 100, silence is necessary in order to not miss any switch at all, especially because the room is entirely dark, so it's not easy to see and hear all the switches. And for the specific paths, I'll display them on screen now. There's the duo path, the trio path, the squad path, and the 5+ path. It's important to note that the trio, squad, and 5+ path are all pretty similar. The only difference is in squad, one person can go directly and lockpick the door, and in 5+, the same thing, but one person can go to the same place and then go straight upstairs so we can get the switches as fast as possible. Communication is probably one of the most major and important aspects of co-op speedrunning, and it's definitely something that everyone needs to learn extremely well. There's not much to actually say, but when it all comes down to seriousness and awareness of just what's happening in the game and what's important to say or not, all that can really be said is just be serious when running. Maybe a few jokes in there can happen, but if you and your team are at a very important phase of the game, especially in places like the greenhouse, all conversations need to be game related and as short as possible. Everyone needs to be fully focused on what's happening in the game and nothing else, especially on world record paces. That said, we can finally move on to the last part of the guide. As the name suggests, this section will just be covering some extra information. This part includes things that are just, useful to know. Let's just quickly get into all the small tricks that come in handy many times when running. A big time save in solos. If you happen to get the right room gen and rush before garden, the rooms that you need between you and the room you need to void becomes increasingly shorter. It's around 2 or 3, and if you do it correctly, you might be able to void through garden. Here's a quick clip of it in action. The skeleton key can be used as a normal lockpick. You shouldn't use a skeleton key for the secret room in the infirmary. It's not useful in runs, especially because it gives no items, just a lot of gold and the herb effect. which you don't really need at all because it doesn't really save time across a run. The door that leads to the box in door 100 can be lockpicked, even with the skeleton key. Walking backwards on beds, only in an L key room, can make getting on top of them easier, making it quicker to get a key on the other side of the bed, as it can sometimes spawn there. If you have the right rush pathing, the treasure rooms in 2 seconds can be used as a safe spot. In item key rooms, you can sometimes not get an item at all. Don't worry, this isn't a glitch, but sometimes just a natural thing that happens in the game. A crucifix can be found in normal item drawers, the writer's desk, and sometimes on the walls of some specific rooms. You can get it in any bedroom layout, and you can also get it on the long room with the 2 closets. It can be above the door, it can be above the exit door, and it can be on the other side of both of those doorways as well. And with that, pretty much everything you need to know has been said. There's just a couple of things that have the chances of being possible new strats, but I won't be showing them, just for the simple fact that this is a guide, and I don't want to possibly confuse new players with useless information. Who knows though, maybe in the future something revolutionary could be found, and you could be the one finding it.
Now, here we are, at the very end of the guide. This might be a little surprise to hear, especially with this pretty bad microphone. I know, it's not the best of the best, but I personally wanted to do this bit. You know, I just wanted to take this moment to immensely thank Atlas for all the help he gave me for this guide. It's thanks to him if this video is even here in the first place. So yeah, just the biggest thanks to him for both this and just being an amazing friend overall. I don't really know what else to add, but I just hope this entire guide can be helpful. We worked on it really hard for the past few weeks, and just hope this can teach more people the best strategies in an efficient and clear way. We always wanted to help more people speedrun this game at the best level, so again, we just hope this can be enough. I'll try to keep it brief and short, but I wanted to immensely thank again my friends, Ream on top, always gonna say that, but also the entire community I've met. It's thanks to you all that I'm still here and love playing this game as much as I do. No matter what drama or problems come up, I'm just thankful for all the good and crazy moments we keep on having. Just keep it going strong, guys.